"He's just a waiter," my son-in-law proclaimed to the wedding guests, pointing at me with contempt, as if I were a shadow unworthy of his elite world. The guests nodded, and I silently filled their glasses. But when someone exclaimed, "My God, he's on TV!" my son-in-law dropped his champagne glass. That moment changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The gift box felt heavier in my hands than it should have. Michael's marble foyer stretched before me like a museum exhibit, all sharp edges and cold surfaces. Sophia appeared from the kitchen, her smile bright but strained. "Dad, you made it!" She kissed my cheek, glancing at the wrapped box. "What's that?" "Grandfather's watch," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Thought Sophia might want it for the wedding." Michael emerged from the living room, wine glass in hand, surveying me like I'd tracked mud across his Persian rug. His gaze lingered on my pressed khakis and polo shirt, my best clothes, but clearly not enough for his standards. "James!" His handshake was brief, dismissive. "Still working at that Italian place?" "Bella Vista, yes." I kept my voice level. "Antonio's been good to me." Michael's attention shifted to the gift. "What's in the box?" Sophia bounced on her toes. "Grandpa's watch. Dad, can I see it?" I unwrapped it carefully, revealing the gold pocket watch that had belonged to my father. Sophia's eyes widened, but Michael barely glanced at it. "Vintage," he said flatly. "Probably worth something to a collector." The dismissal stung. This wasn't about money. It was about family, about history. But before I could explain, Aunt Mary called from the dining room. "Dinner's ready." We moved to the table, another showcase of Michael's wealth. Crystal glasses caught the light from an ornate chandelier. I took the seat Sophia indicated, feeling increasingly out of place among the expensive settings. "So," I began, attempting conversation, "the wedding planning must be exciting. How many guests are you expecting?" Michael cut his steak with surgical precision. "We're keeping it intimate. Close friends, professional associates." "My colleagues from the firm," Sophia added. "Michael's business partners. Family, of course." "Of course," Michael echoed, but something in his tone made me look up. The conversation continued around me. Wedding venues, catering choices, flower arrangements. I listened, offering occasional comments, but Michael's responses grew shorter, his glances more pointed. Finally, he set down his fork. "James, I think we should discuss something." Sophia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Michael, it's about the wedding," he continued, his voice taking on a boardroom authority. "I've been thinking about the guest list, the atmosphere we want to create." My chest tightened. "What about it?" "Well," Michael leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "My guests are influential people. Tech executives, venture capitalists, city council members. This isn't just a celebration, it's a networking opportunity." "Michael," Sophia's voice held a warning. He ignored her. "I need to be direct, James. You're a waiter. My guests move in different circles. Your presence would be problematic." The words hit like a physical blow. I felt my face flush, my hands tighten on my napkin. Around the table, silence settled heavy as lead. "That's my father," Sophia said, her voice sharp. "And I respect that," Michael replied smoothly. "But this wedding is an investment in our future. I won't risk my reputation because of misplaced sentimentality." I found my voice. "I raised Sophia. I worked double shifts to pay for her education. That was admirable," Michael cut me off. "But this is reality. You serve food for a living. My guests create jobs, fund startups, influence policy. Do you really think you belong in that conversation?" The room spun slightly. Sophia was saying something, her voice rising, but the blood rushing in my ears made it hard to focus. Aunt Mary cleared her throat uncomfortably. Michael stood up, his decision made. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately. James, would you join me on the terrace?" The sliding door closed behind us with a soft click, cutting off Sophia's protests from inside. Michael's terrace was like everything else in his house, expensive, designed to impress. Below us, workers were setting up white chairs in the garden, stringing lights between trees. My daughter's wedding preparations happening right in front of me. Michael positioned himself against the railing, the garden backdrop framing him like a portrait of success. I stood awkwardly near the door, still clutching the gift box. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" He gestured toward the city lights beyond his property. This house cost me $2.3 million. The wedding alone is running $200,000. The number hit me like a slap. 200,000? I'd never seen that much money in my lifetime, let alone spent it on a single day. 200? I started. 1,000, yes. Michael's smile was cold. Flowers are 15 grand. The photographer, another 8. Sophia's dress? $12,000. Each figure was a reminder of the gap between us. I watched the workers below arranging chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I paid for Sophia's college, I said, my voice quiet but steady. 4 years at Berkeley. Worked double shifts, saved every tip. For her apartment when she graduated. For her car. That was then. Michael's interruption was sharp. This is now. She's my responsibility. And I'm telling you, your presence at this wedding would be an embarrassment. The words burned. I looked down at the gift in my hands. My father's watch that had seemed so meaningful an hour ago. You can't just... I can, and I will. Michael moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you understand what this day means? Senator Williams will be there. The mayor. CEOs whose companies could change Sophia's future. And you want to, what, serve them drinks? Through the glass door, I could see Sophia pacing in the dining room, her face twisted with worry. She kept glancing toward the terrace, but made no move to interrupt. She's my daughter, I said. She's my fiancée. Michael's voice was final. And I won't let you turn her wedding into a charity case. This isn't about family sentiment, James. This is about protecting what matters. The workers below had nearly finished with the chairs, row after row of white seats, all facing an altar where my daughter would marry this man, where I wouldn't be allowed to sit. Fine. The word came out barely audible. I won't come. Michael's expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. I'm glad we understand each other. I turned toward the door, the conversation clearly over. My reflection in the glass looked old, defeated. Behind me, Michael remained at the railing, probably already planning which important person would sit in what should have been my seat. James. His voice stopped me at the door. Leave the watch. Sophia shouldn't be burdened with reminders of complications. I paused, my hand on the door handle. The gift box felt impossibly heavy. Without looking back, I stepped inside, walking past Sophia's questioning gaze, past Aunt Mary's concerned frown. I made it to the front door before Sophia caught up with me. Dad, wait. It's fine, sweetheart. I kissed her forehead, still holding the unwrapped watch. Congratulations on your engagement. I walked to my car without looking back, the weight of Michael's dismissal settling into my bones like winter cold. The drive home took me through 3 different worlds. Michael's neighborhood, with its manicured lawns and electronic gates, gave way to middle-class suburbs. Then finally to my part of town, where apartment buildings crowded together, like old friends sharing space. My building had no doorman, no marble foyer, just a lobby with fluorescent lights and mailboxes that hadn't been painted in years. I climbed 2 flights of stairs, my legs feeling heavier with each step. Inside my 1-bedroom apartment, the silence was complete. No expensive artwork on the walls, no crystal glasses catching light from designer fixtures. Just photographs of Sophia at various ages, graduation, birthdays, Christmas mornings when money was tight, but happiness was abundant. I set the watch box on my kitchen table and stared at it. Grandfather's watch, passed down through 3 generations of Collins men. Worth something to a collector, Michael had said, as if its only value was monetary. The calculator sat in my desk drawer, beneath old bills and expired coupons. I pulled it out and started adding. Sophia's tuition, $42,000 per year. Room and board, $18,000 annually. Her car, the down payment had been $3,000 from my savings. Her security deposit when she moved out, another $2,000. The numbers blurred together. Over $200,000, earned 1 table at a time, 1 tip at a time. 20 years of double shifts and aching feet and polite smiles for customers who barely saw me as human. My phone buzzed. Sophia's name appeared on the screen. Dad? Her voice was thick with tears. I'm so sorry about tonight. It's okay, sweetheart. It's not okay. Michael had no right to talk to you like that. You're my father. You should be at my wedding. I closed my eyes, listening to her pain. Sometimes life isn't fair, Sophia, but I'll find a way to be there for you. How? Michael meant what he said. He won't change his mind. Through my bedroom window, I could see the lights of downtown where Bella Vista sat among dozens of other restaurants, where I'd worked for 15 years, invisible in my black vest and white shirt, serving people who never learned my name. Don't worry about it, I told her. Just focus on being happy. That's all I've ever wanted. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness, thinking about Michael's words. You serve food for a living, as if that made me less of a person, less worthy of witnessing my own daughter's wedding. I walked to my closet and pulled out my work uniform. Black pants, white shirt, black vest, the costume of invisibility that had paid Sophia's way through life. How many important dinners had I served? How many wealthy guests had I made comfortable while remaining utterly forgettable? The uniform felt different in my hands tonight, not like a symbol of servitude, but like armor, like possibility. Michael was right about one thing. I was just a waiter, but he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd forgotten that waiters are invisible. We move through important events, serving the powerful, hearing their conversations, witnessing their private moments. We're part of the scenery, essential but unnoticed. I held up the black vest, studying its simple lines. Tomorrow I would call Antonio and ask him a favor, not as James Collins, father of the bride, but as James Collins, experienced waiter who knew how to disappear into any crowd. Michael wanted to protect his precious networking event from the embarrassment of my presence. He'd never suspect that the man refilling his guests' wine glasses might be the same person he'd humiliated on his terrace. The watchbox caught the light from my desk lamp, its gold surface gleaming with promise. Grandfather's timepiece, marking moments that mattered. Soon it would mark the moment when a father reclaimed his place at his daughter's wedding. I smiled for the first time all evening. Michael Thompson was about to learn that some battles couldn't be won with money alone. Saturday morning came too early. Sleep had been impossible. My mind cycling through Michael's words, Sophia's tears, the weight of what I was planning. By 8:30 I was dressed and driving toward Bella Vista, the familiar route offering no comfort today. The restaurant looked different in morning light. Empty dining rooms always felt larger, more honest somehow. No guests to perform for, no masks to wear, just tables, chairs, and the quiet hum of preparation. Antonio's SUV sat in the staff parking lot. Good. I needed this conversation to happen before the lunch rush, before other servers arrived with their weekend energy and gossip. Inside, the coffee machine was already brewing. Antonio stood at the prep station, slicing onions with mechanical precision, his weathered hands moving in practiced rhythm. 20 years of friendship had taught me to read his moods. Today he seemed troubled. "You're early," he said without looking up. "Saturday shifts don't start until 10. "Couldn't sleep?" I poured coffee into 2 mugs, adding sugar to his the way he liked it. The ritual felt important, grounding. "Antonio, I need to ask you something." He accepted the coffee, finally meeting my eyes. Lines around them spoke of long nights and difficult decisions, the weight of keeping a family business alive in an expensive city. "What troubles you, my friend?" The words came harder than I'd expected. "Tomorrow is Sophia's wedding." "Ah, yes, at the big house in Hillsborough. Very fancy." He sipped his coffee. "You must be proud." "I am, but there's a problem." I leaned against the counter, choosing words carefully. "Her fiancé doesn't want me there." Antonio's knife stopped moving. "What do you mean?" "He thinks I'm not good enough for his guests." "Too embarrassing. Just a waiter," he said. The silence stretched between us. Antonio set down his knife, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder. "This man, he said this to you?" "Last night, told me not to come to my own daughter's wedding." Antonio's hands clenched into fists. In his voice I heard the echo of every slight he'd endured as an immigrant, every time someone had looked through him like he didn't matter. What kind of man turns away a father from his daughter's wedding? The kind who cares more about appearances than family. I took a deep breath. "That's why I need your help." His eyebrows rose. "What can I do?" "Hire me to work the wedding, just for tomorrow. One day." Antonio stared at me like I'd suggested robbing a bank. You want to work your own daughter's wedding? James, that's crazy. It's the only way to be there. Michael can't forbid a waiter from working his event. I'll be invisible, just part of the service. But I'll see her walk down the aisle. I'll be there when she says her vows. He shook his head slowly. This is not right. A father should sit in the front row, not serve drinks to strangers. Sometimes we don't get what should be. We take what we can get. Antonio returned to his onions, cutting with more force than necessary. The knife blade caught the morning light, flashing like his changing expressions. You really want to do this thing? I've never wanted anything more. Another long silence. Outside, delivery trucks rumbled past, starting their daily routes. Normal Saturday morning sounds for everyone except me. The catering company, they handle the service, Antonio said finally. But I know the manager, Giuseppe Torino. We worked together years ago. My chest tightened with hope. Would he add me to the crew? For you? Yes. Giuseppe owes me favors. Antonio wiped his hands on his apron. You're sure about this, James? Once you start serving that man's guests, there's no going back. No dignity in retreat. My dignity isn't in question here. His is. Antonio studied my face, searching for doubt he wouldn't find. After 20 years, he knew my stubborn streak as well as anyone. Okay then, I'll call Giuseppe this morning. You'll work the wedding tomorrow. Relief flooded through me like warm coffee on a cold morning. Thank you, Antonio. I won't forget this. You're a good man, James Collins. If that fancy son-in-law can't see it, that's his blindness, not your fault. I finished my coffee, already mentally preparing for tomorrow. Black pants, white shirt, bow tie if required, the uniform of invisibility that would let me witness the most important day of my daughter's life. What time should I be there? Setup starts at 11. Giuseppe will expect you then. Antonio returned to his prep work. And James, don't let that man make you feel small. You've earned your place in this world. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in hours. Tomorrow, Michael Thompson would learn that some battles couldn't be won with money and threats. Some fathers couldn't be bought, intimidated, or erased. The morning sun felt warmer on my face. One more day to wait. The afternoon setup at Bella Vista's private dining room moved with mechanical efficiency. 6 hours had passed since my conversation with Antonio. 6 hours of regular lunch service, smiling at customers, pretending normalcy while my mind counted down to tomorrow. Round tables filled the space like white-clothed islands, each one requiring precise spacing for servers to navigate. I moved between them with practiced ease, adjusting angles, ensuring the room flowed properly for tomorrow's service. Crystal glasses caught light from the chandeliers Antonio had installed last year, each table setting a small masterpiece of folded napkins and polished silverware. Sophia's wedding reception would be beautiful, even if I'd only see it from the kitchen's perspective. The sound of voices from the lobby made me look up. Sophia's laugh carried through the doorway, bright and nervous, followed by heavier footsteps on marble floors. Michael's voice cut through the afternoon quiet. The flowers should be positioned there, not blocking the dance floor. My hands stilled on the tablecloth I was adjusting. They were here for the final walkthrough, checking details for tomorrow's perfection. I hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for seeing them before the wedding day. Dad? Sophia's voice floated from the doorway. I turned, forcing a smile. She looked radiant in her casual clothes, cheeks flushed with excitement and pre-wedding stress. Behind her, Michael's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something much darker. What are you doing here? His words came out sharp, accusatory. Working, I kept my voice level, professional. Antonio asked me to help with setup. Michael's face went rigid. You can't be serious. Sophia stepped between us, her wedding glow dimming. What's wrong now? Your father is manipulating the situation, Michael said, his voice rising. I told him not to come to the wedding, so he gets himself hired as staff. I'm here to work, I repeated, straightening another chair. Nothing more. This is manipulation, Michael's control cracked. You want to humiliate me in front of my guests. The accusation hung in the air like broken glass. Sophia's hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with the realization that her wedding day was becoming a battlefield. Stop it, both of you. Her voice cracked with emotion. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Michael pointed at me like I was contaminating his perfect event. He's doing this on purpose, making himself the victim, forcing his way into spaces where he doesn't belong. I belong wherever my daughter is, I said quietly. Not anymore. Michael's mask of civility finally slipped completely. She's my responsibility now, my wife, my guests, my event, and I won't have you serving drinks to people who matter while playing the martyred father. Sophia stepped toward me, tears starting. Dad, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I touched her shoulder gently. But don't worry. Your guests won't even notice I'm here. I'll just do my job. Your job, Michael spat, is to stay away. This wedding costs more than you make in 5 years. I won't let you turn it into some pathetic statement about your wounded pride. The numbers again. Always back to money with him, as if dollar amounts determined human worth. My pride isn't wounded, I said. It's intact. Michael's laugh was harsh. Is it? Then why this charade? Why not accept that some doors are closed to you? Because she's my daughter, and tomorrow, when she needs her father's blessing, I'll be here to give it. As hired help, as whatever it takes. Sophia was crying now, quiet tears that broke my heart. Her perfect wedding planning, destroyed by the 2 men who should have been protecting her happiness. Michael turned toward the door, his decision made. We'll see about that. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Sophia followed him, casting one last apologetic look over her shoulder. I'm sorry, Dad. Don't be, sweetheart. Just focus on being happy tomorrow. They left, their footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. I returned to adjusting tables, but my hands shook slightly now. Michael's parting words carried weight, the promise of action, not empty anger. Through the dining room windows, I watched their car pull away. Tomorrow would bring more than I'd bargained for, but tonight I'd finish preparing the room where my daughter would celebrate the beginning of her new life. Whatever Michael was planning, I'd be ready. Evening shadows stretched across Bella Vista's dining room as I polished the last of the silverware. The tables stood ready like soldiers in formation, each place setting perfect for tomorrow's guests. 4 hours had passed since Michael's departure, 4 hours of steady work that kept my hands busy while my mind churned. The kitchen doors swung open. Antonio emerged from his office, his expression serious in a way that made my stomach clench. Something had changed in the hour since I'd last seen him. James, my friend? His voice carried weight. We need to talk. I set down the silver serving spoon I'd been polishing. What happened? Antonio pulled out a chair at the nearest table, settling his bulk into it like a man carrying bad news. The gesture itself was telling. Antonio rarely sat during work hours. Your son-in-law came back. My hands stilled. When? Hour ago. Drove up in that expensive car, marched in here like he owned the place. Antonio's weathered face hardened. Made me an offer I was supposed to find irresistible. The words hit like cold water. Michael hadn't accepted defeat on the terrace. Of course he hadn't. Men like him didn't accept anything that challenged their control. What kind of offer? Antonio leaned forward, his voice dropping. $5,000, cash, for not letting you work tomorrow. The number stunned me. 5,000 was more than I made in 2 months. Money that could transform Antonio's struggling restaurant. The casual dismissal of such an amount revealed how desperate Michael had become. What did you tell him? I told him principles aren't for sale. Antonio's eyes flashed. Then he got angry. Started talking about health inspectors, liquor license reviews, how many important people he knows in city government. My chest tightened. Michael wasn't just trying to buy Antonio's cooperation. He was threatening his livelihood, the family business that had taken 20 years to build. Antonio, you don't have to. Stop. He held up a weathered hand. You think I survived 20 years in this business by backing down from bullies? Your son-in-law, he made a mistake. He showed me who he really is. The quiet intensity in Antonio's voice was more frightening than any shouting. This was a man who'd built something from nothing, who understood the difference between strength and power. What exactly did he say? That you were obsessed, unstable, that letting you work would endanger his guests' safety. Antonio's mouth twisted with disgust. Then he offered more money. 10,000, like I'm some immigrant who doesn't understand American values. The full picture crystallized. Michael wasn't just embarrassed by my presence. He was genuinely afraid of what I might do, what I might say to his important guests. The control he'd worked so hard to establish was slipping. "I'm sorry he threatened you." "Threats?" Antonio laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let him try. I have friends, too. Not rich friends, but good friends. Friends who understand loyalty." I resumed polishing silverware, needing the motion to process what I'd learned. Michael's desperation ran deeper than wounded pride. This was about something fundamental, his need to control every aspect of his world, to eliminate any variable that might expose his insecurities. "So what happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow you work." Antonio stood, decision made. "Giuseppe expects you at 11. And if your son-in-law wants to make trouble, he'll discover that immigrants know how to fight back." The silverware gleamed under the dining room lights, each piece reflecting a distorted image of my face. Tomorrow, I'd use these same utensils to serve Michael's guests, moving through his perfect event, like a ghost he couldn't exorcise. "Thank you, Antonio, for everything." "Don't thank me yet." His expression grew troubled. "Men like your son-in-law, they don't give up easy. Tonight, he'll be making more phone calls, pulling more strings. Tomorrow might not go the way either of us expects." I looked around the dining room one final time. Chairs aligned perfectly, glasses sparkling, flowers arranged with artistic precision. Sophia's wedding reception ready for guests who would never know about the battle being fought for access to it. "Let him make his calls," I said. "Tomorrow I'll be exactly where I belong." Antonio nodded, heading back toward his office. "Remember, James, we're not just fighting for tomorrow. We're fighting for the right to exist in the same world as our children." The weight of his words settled over me like evening shadows. This wasn't about a wedding anymore. It was about something much larger. Dignity, respect, the right to be present for the moments that mattered most. Tomorrow would test everything I believed about myself, everything I'd taught Sophia about standing up for what's right. Michael Thompson was about to learn that some fathers couldn't be bought, threatened, or erased. I finished the last piece of silverware and turned off the dining room lights. One more night to prepare for the most important performance of my life. 22 hours of waiting had led to this moment. The banquet hall gleamed under crystal chandeliers, every surface polished to perfection. White roses cascaded from tall centerpieces, their petals catching the evening light like scattered diamonds. I moved through this elegance carrying a silver tray of champagne flutes, invisible in my black vest and bow tie. The first guests arrived precisely at 5. Tech executives in $1,000 suits, venture capitalists whose casual conversations involved millions, city officials whose handshakes could change policies. Michael's people, the ones who mattered in his carefully constructed world. "Champagne?" I offered the tray to a distinguished woman in pearls, her evening gown probably worth more than I earned in 6 months. "How lovely," she smiled, accepting a glass. "What an elegant affair. Michael certainly knows how to host." Through the crowd, I caught sight of the head table where Sophia glowed in her wedding dress, radiant despite the undercurrents swirling around her special day. Michael stood beside her, greeting guests with practiced charm, though his eyes kept finding me across the room. An elderly gentleman in a perfectly tailored tuxedo approached my station. "Excellent service, young man. You're very attentive." "Thank you, sir. Would you care for an appetizer?" "Please." He selected a salmon canap from my tray. "You carry yourself well. Not many waiters have such natural grace these days." The compliment warmed me more than it should have. Natural grace. If only he knew the years of training that had created this ease of movement, this ability to navigate social spaces with quiet confidence. "James has worked with us for many years." Antonio's voice came from behind me. "One of our finest staff members." The gentleman nodded approvingly. "It shows. Proper service is becoming a lost art." Michael's voice carried across the room as he laughed at someone's joke, but his laughter seemed forced, his glances in my direction increasingly frequent. Each time our eyes met, I saw the same calculation, wondering when I might crack, when the humiliation might become too much. A young woman in a stunning blue dress approached. "Excuse me, could you help my grandmother to her seat? She's having trouble with her walker." "Of course." I set down my tray and offered my arm to the elderly lady, guiding her carefully between tables. Her grateful smile reminded me of similar moments from long ago, when courtesy wasn't just professional training, but natural instinct. "Such a gentleman," she murmured. "Your parents raised you well." If only she knew my parents had been gone for decades, that everything I'd learned about grace under pressure came from years of performing, for audiences far larger than this one. The dining room filled steadily with Michael's chosen guests. Each face represented influence, wealth, connections that could advance careers or destroy them with a whispered word. They spoke in the casual tones of those accustomed to power, discussing stock options and political appointments like others might talk about weather. Sophia caught my eye from across the room and offered a subtle smile, grateful, apologetic, proud. In that moment, she looked exactly as she had at 5 years old, when she'd insisted I wear a crown to her imaginary tea parties, because fathers should look important too. Michael moved toward the head table, preparing for the traditional toasts. His confidence seemed restored now, surrounded by his peers, secure in his territory. The nervous energy from yesterday had transformed into something more dangerous, the assurance of a man who believed he controlled every variable. I refreshed champagne glasses around the room, ensuring everyone was prepared for the formal ceremony portion of the evening. The crystal sang softly as glasses touched, a delicate music that spoke of celebration and joy. At the head table, Michael stood and tapped his glass with a silver spoon. The room's conversation gradually quieted, all attention turning toward the groom, who commanded their respect through wealth and influence. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried easily across the space, "if I could have your attention for a moment." The room fell silent as Michael's voice commanded attention. I continued moving between tables, refilling glasses that barely needed refreshing, my trained hands steady despite the growing tension in my chest. "Thank you all for sharing this incredible evening with Sophia and me," Michael began, his tone warm and confident. "We're surrounded by the people who matter most, colleagues who've built this community, friends who've supported our journey, family who've shaped our values." Applause rippled through the crowd. Sophia beamed up at him, her face glowing with bridal joy and champagne. I paused near a corner table, champagne bottle poised, waiting for the toast to conclude. Michael's expression shifted subtly, his eyes finding mine across the room. Success in life comes from understanding your place, from recognizing what truly matters. We've invited people tonight who represent excellence, achievement, the very best of what our society offers. Something cold settled in my stomach. The toast was taking an unexpected turn, moving away from traditional celebration towards something more pointed. "Which makes it important," Michael continued, his voice gaining edge, "to acknowledge different levels of contribution. Not everyone reaches the same heights. Not everyone matters equally." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the warm, unifying message wedding toasts typically delivered. Take this man, for instance. Michael's hand gestured directly at me, causing every head in the room to turn. "James Collins. He's just a waiter. Never amounted to anything significant. Never built anything lasting. A man who peaked in his 20s and has spent 40 years sliding downward." The champagne bottle felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Sophia's face had gone white, her eyes wide with horror. Around the room, guests exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable with the cruelty unfolding before them. "He wants to be part of this celebration." Michael's voice grew stronger, fed by the attention. "But the truth is, there are makers and there are servers, leaders and followers, people who matter and people who simply exist to facilitate the lives of those who do." I set the champagne bottle on the nearest table with careful precision. My hands remained steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Michael, please stop." Sophia's voice was barely audible, lost in the stunned silence. But Michael was beyond stopping now, drunk on power and the intoxication of public dominance. "Some people spend their lives dreaming of significance, while others actually achieve it. The difference is fundamental, unchangeable. Natural selection in action." I straightened my bow tie and smoothed my vest, habits from another lifetime asserting themselves automatically. When I spoke, my voice carried clearly across the silent room. "Would anyone like more champagne?" The simple question, delivered with perfect composure, seemed to break Michael's momentum. He stared at me, perhaps expecting anger, tears, or defensive justification. Instead, he found the same professional courtesy I'd shown every guest that evening. A few people nodded mutely. I retrieved my bottle and continued my rounds, moving between tables with the same graceful efficiency I'd maintained all evening. Each pour was precise, each interaction courteous and warm. Michael remained standing, his toast hanging unfinished in the air. The cruel words had achieved their purpose, establishing his dominance, demonstrating his power to humiliate without consequence. But something in my calm response seemed to rob him of the satisfaction he'd expected. An elderly woman near the window cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should eat dinner now?" Others murmured agreement, grateful for any escape from the uncomfortable moment. Sophia pressed her napkin to her eyes, trying to preserve her makeup while processing the horror of what had just occurred. I reached their table last, approaching with the same professional demeanor I'd shown everyone else. "More champagne for the bride and groom?" Sophia looked up at me with tears threatening to spill. "Dad, I'm so sorry." "It's your wedding day, sweetheart. Nothing else matters." Michael watched our exchange with narrowed eyes, perhaps realizing that his public attack had failed to break me as intended. If anything, my composure made his cruelty appear petty and small. The room buzzed with uncomfortable energy, guests struggling to process what they'd witnessed. Conversations restarted gradually, but the celebration's joy had been poisoned by Michael's display of power. I moved toward the kitchen to check on the next course, leaving behind a room full of people who would remember this evening not for its elegance, but for the moment when a groom chose cruelty over celebration. The damage was done, but I was still standing. 15 minutes had passed since Michael's toast, and the room still hummed with residual discomfort. Conversations had resumed, but they carried an artificial quality, guests working harder than usual to maintain festive spirits. I continued my service rounds, offering second helpings and clearing plates with the same quiet efficiency. Near the far wall, a young man in his 20s sat scrolling through his phone, occasionally glancing at the television mounted above the bar. Bella Vista kept classic films playing during events, Antonio's touch of old Hollywood glamour that distinguished his venue from sterile hotel ballrooms. The young man's attention drifted between his device and the screen, where black and white images flickered in the background of the wedding chatter. Something caught his focus, causing him to lean forward and study the television more intently. I was clearing glasses from a nearby table when I heard his sharp intake of breath. "Oh, my word," he said, loud enough to catch his companion's attention. "He's on television." Several guests looked up from their conversations, following his gaze to the screen above the bar. The young man's excitement was infectious, drawing more eyes toward whatever had captured his interest. "That's the same man." His voice carried clearly across the dining room now. "The waiter!" The word rippled through nearby tables like a stone dropped in still water. Heads turned between the television screen and my position near the dessert station, trying to understand the connection being made. An elderly woman in an emerald dress peered over her glasses at the screen, then at me, then back again, her face transformed with recognition and wonder. "I remember that film," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "He was wonderful. Such presence, such natural ability." More guests were turning now, drawn by the growing commotion. The television showed a young man in a naval uniform, his face earnest and hopeful as he spoke to someone off camera. The image was crisp despite its age, every detail clear under the restaurant's careful lighting. "That's definitely him," another voice confirmed. 30 years younger, but absolutely the same person. I felt the weight of every gaze in the room settling on me like spotlights. The careful invisibility I'd maintained all evening evaporated in an instant, replaced by the uncomfortable exposure I'd spent decades avoiding. Michael's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, hitting his plate with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the sudden quiet. His face had gone pale, mouth slightly open as he stared between the television and me. "Ladies and gentlemen," the young man called out, now standing in his excitement, "we have a genuine movie star serving our champagne." The revelation spread through the room like wildfire. Guests pulled out phones, searching movie databases and streaming services. Elderly attendees shared memories of seeing my films in theaters, their voices growing animated with nostalgia and discovery. James Collins, one woman read from her phone. 7 major films between 1988 and 1995. Golden Globe nomination for Atlantic Crossing. Sophia's hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide not with shame but with dawning understanding. She was seeing her father's sacrifices through new eyes, comprehending the magnitude of what he'd given up for her future. I continued clearing the table in front of me, my movements unchanged despite the scrutiny. The young man on the television screen delivered his lines with passion and conviction, while the older man in the dining room simply did his job. "Why didn't you say anything?" a guest called out, his tone respectful rather than mocking. I looked up from the plates I was stacking, meeting his gaze with the same quiet dignity I'd maintained all evening. "Tonight isn't about me." The simple response seemed to deepen the room's fascination. Here was a man who had commanded theater screens, who had been recognized and celebrated, now serving champagne without seeking recognition or special treatment. Michael remained frozen at the head table, his elaborate plans for dominance crumbling around him. The man he'd publicly dismissed as insignificant had just been revealed as someone who had achieved exactly the kind of recognition Michael desperately craved. Around the room, phones emerged as guests searched for clips and photographs, eager to connect their glamorous discovery with the gracious server who had impressed them all evening. The television continued playing, indifferent to the drama unfolding in its glow. The room pulsed with excited whispers and pointing fingers. Guests huddled around phones, searching for clips and photographs, their faces bright with the thrill of discovery. I continued holding my empty serving tray, feeling the weight of every gaze but maintaining the same professional posture I'd carried all evening. The whispers grew louder. 7 films between 1988 and 1995. Golden Globe nomination. I remember seeing him in theaters. The excitement was infectious, spreading through the dining room like ripples on a pond. I set my tray on the nearest table and slowly untied my apron. The simple gesture felt monumental, like removing a costume I'd worn for too long. Beneath it, my white shirt and black vest remained, but something fundamental had shifted. "Yes," I said, my voice carrying easily across the suddenly quiet room. "That's me in the film. I was once an actor." The admission seemed to release something in the air. Guests leaned forward, drawn by the quiet confidence in my tone. "But when Sophia was born," I continued, glancing toward my daughter's tear-streaked face, "I chose family. I chose love over spotlights, steady work over uncertain fame, and I've never been ashamed of serving others, of honest work that paid for my daughter's education and future." Sophia pushed back her chair and moved toward me, her wedding dress rustling against tables as she navigated through the crowd. Other guests stepped aside, creating a path between us. "Dad?" Her voice broke on the word. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I reached out and took her hands, feeling their tremor through her white gloves. "The past doesn't define us, sweetheart. What matters is that I'm here, with you, on the most important day of your life." Tears spilled down her cheeks, carrying mascara in dark trails. "You gave up everything for me." "I gained everything," I corrected. "A daughter who became an extraordinary woman. 28 years of watching you grow, learn, succeed. No role could have given me that." Around us, the room had fallen completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had emerged from their station, drawn by the emotion unfolding in their dining room. An elderly man near the windows stood first. "You're a true gentleman, sir." The words seemed to break a dam. Other guests rose, their applause starting tentatively but growing stronger. Soon the entire room was standing, celebrating not the revelation of a former celebrity, but the recognition of genuine character. "To James!" someone called out. "To real men who choose family," another voice added. The applause continued, warm and sustained. I looked around at faces that had witnessed my humiliation an hour earlier and now showed nothing but respect and admiration. Sophia wrapped her arms around me, her wedding veil cascading over both our shoulders. "I'm so proud to be your daughter." At the head table, Michael remained seated, his face pale and his champagne glass forgotten in his hand. The man who had publicly dismissed me as insignificant now faced the reality of what he'd done. Humiliated a respected actor in front of people who would remember this moment for years. The applause gradually faded, but the energy in the room had completely transformed. Guests approached with warm handshakes and genuine smiles, no longer seeing a servant, but recognizing a fellow human being worthy of respect. "Mr. Collins," a young woman said, "I just found clips from Atlantic Crossing online. Your performance was incredible." "Thank you," I replied simply, "but tonight belongs to Sophia and Michael." The mention of his name seemed to awaken something in the groom. Michael stood slowly from his chair, his movements uncertain, like a man learning to walk again after a long illness. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine shame, the first crack in his armor of arrogance and control. The celebration continued around us, but I found myself needing a moment away from the attention. 20 years of invisibility had made the sudden spotlight uncomfortable, despite its warmth. I moved toward the bar area, seeking the quiet corner where Antonio kept coffee warm for his staff. The familiar ritual of pouring coffee helped steady my hands. Steam rose from the cup, carrying the rich aroma that had punctuated countless shifts at Bella Vista. Some things remained constant even when everything else changed. "James Collins, you magnificent old fraud." The voice from behind me carried decades of shared history. I turned to find Frank Morgan approaching with his characteristic wide grin, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the evening hour. "Frank?" I set down my coffee and embraced my old friend. "What are you doing here?" "Sophia invited me weeks ago. Said her father worked at this place, but didn't mention it was the James Collins." His eyes sparkled with mischief. "Imagine my surprise walking in to find you hiding behind a serving tray." Frank looked exactly as I remembered. Expensive suit, confident posture, the bearing of a man who'd never left the industry that had defined both our youths. "I'm not hiding," I said. "I'm working." "Working? James, do you know what's happening with your films? Atlantic Crossing plays on retro channels monthly. Complete cult classic. Young filmmakers study your performance techniques." The information felt surreal. While I'd been serving champagne and clearing tables, somewhere in the world people were analyzing work I'd done 30 years ago. "That's wonderful, Frank, but I'm serious. There's talk of a documentary about actors who disappeared at their peak. Your name comes up constantly." Frank's enthusiasm was infectious, his hands gesturing as he painted pictures of renewed recognition and career resurrection. "My life is here now," I interrupted gently, "with family, with work that matters." Frank studied my face, perhaps seeing something he hadn't expected. "You're really content, aren't you? Serving tables when you could be commanding stages again?" Through the doorway, I could see Sophia mingling with guests, her face glowing with pride and love. Michael remained at the head table, still processing the evening's revelations. "More than content," I said, "fulfilled in ways I never was during my acting days. But the opportunities, James. The industry has changed. Character actors are in demand. Your experience, your natural presence." Frank paused, reading my expression. "You're not even tempted?" I picked up my coffee again, letting its warmth seep through the porcelain into my palms. "Success isn't measured in spotlights, Frank. It's measured in the love of people who matter." Frank followed my gaze toward Sophia, understanding dawning in his expression. "She doesn't know, does she? About how big you really were? She knows I love her. Everything else is just background noise." "James Collins, the philosopher," Frank chuckled, but his tone carried respect rather than mockery. "You always were different from the rest of us." "Not different, just clear about priorities." We stood in comfortable silence, two old friends separated by decades of different choices. Frank's path had led through continued industry connections, mine through serving trays and parent-teacher conferences. Neither was wrong, but only one had brought me peace. "The offer stands," Frank said quietly. "If you ever want to explore possibilities, I know people who would be thrilled to work with you again." "I appreciate that, truly, but my performing days are behind me." Frank nodded, finally understanding that this wasn't false modesty or fear, but genuine contentment with the life I'd built. Across the room, I noticed Michael standing now, his posture different than before. The arrogance had drained from his shoulders, replaced by something heavier, the weight of recognition and regret. "I should get back," I said to Frank. "Family obligations." "Of course," Frank clasped my shoulder. For what it's worth, you made the right choice. That daughter of yours looks at you like you hung the moon. As Frank melted back into the crowd of guests, I finished my coffee and prepared to return to whatever came next. The evening had brought revelations I'd never expected, but my priorities remained unchanged. Sophia's happiness, family peace, the simple satisfaction of work well done. Michael was walking toward the microphone now, his face set with determination. Michael's approach to the microphone drew every eye in the room. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by the careful movements of a man navigating unfamiliar, emotional territory. I remained near the bar, watching as my son-in-law prepared to address the same audience he'd commanded so cruelly an hour before. He tapped the microphone, and the room quieted instantly. Wedding guests who had been chatting excitedly about my acting career turned their attention to the man who had publicly humiliated me, curious about what he might say now. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael began, his voice lacking its previous authority. Earlier tonight, I said things that were inexcusable. I want to apologize, especially to James. The silence was absolute. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their cleanup to listen. I was wrong, completely wrong. Michael's eyes found mine across the room. He's not just a waiter. He's a wonderful father, a man of genuine character, and someone who gave up fame to raise his daughter with love and dedication. His voice caught slightly on the words, the practiced businessman struggling with public vulnerability. I judged him by superficial standards, by income and social position, when I should have recognized the depth of his character. James Collins is more of a man than I realized, and I'm sorry it took this evening for me to see it. Michael paused, gathering courage for what came next. James, if you'll accept it, I'd like to start over, not as the embarrassing father-in-law I tried to hide, but as Sophia's beloved father, welcomed and honored in our family. The room held its breath. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response to this public reversal. I walked toward the head table, my steps measured and calm. Sophia watched with tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her heart. Thank you, Michael, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the quiet room. Family is what matters most. Everything else is just noise. I extended my hand to him. He took it with both of his, the gesture more than a handshake. It was a bridge across the chasm his earlier cruelty had created. I'm sorry, he whispered, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I was threatened by your relationship with Sophia, scared you'd make me look small by comparison. You did that yourself, I replied gently, but we can move forward from here. Sophia stood and moved toward us, her wedding dress flowing around her like clouds. She wrapped her arms around both of us, creating a circle of reconciliation that had seemed impossible an hour earlier. I love you both, she said through tears of joy rather than pain. The room erupted in applause, but this time it felt different. Not the polite recognition of social obligation, but genuine celebration of authentic resolution. Guests rose from their seats, raising glasses in spontaneous toasts. To James! To family! To real character! Antonio emerged from the kitchen, his weathered face bright with satisfaction. 20 years of friendship had led to this moment of vindication, and his smile said everything words couldn't express. As the applause continued, Michael turned to address the room one final time. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating love and new beginnings. It took me too long to realize that love includes honoring the people who shaped the woman I'm lucky enough to marry. He lifted his champagne glass. To James Collins, actor, father, and the man who taught my wife that true success means putting family first. The toast echoed through the room, glasses clinking in harmony rather than obligation. The celebration that had begun as a display of wealth and status had transformed into something deeper, a recognition of authentic values and genuine character. Sophia took my arm as the formal dinner concluded and the dancing began. Would you honor me with the father-daughter dance, Dad? Always, I replied. As we moved onto the dance floor, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirrors along the wall, still wearing my waiter's vest and bow tie, but somehow looking different. Not like hired help, but like exactly who I was, a father celebrating his daughter's happiness. The music began, and Sophia and I danced while wedding guests formed a circle around us. Michael watched with a genuine smile, his earlier arrogance replaced by what looked like gratitude. Frank appeared at the edge of the crowd, raising his glass in a subtle salute to the man who had chosen love over acclaim, and found both in the end. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.